As we pulled into Tahiti, Tahiti is like, it's hard to believe that Tahiti actually exists if you've ever been there, because it's so beautiful. The mountains just stretch up to the sky. It is just an incredible place. And we had just come from Easter Island, which is dry and not much on there and everything. And so all these people were used to that. And as we pulled into the harbor, it was one of the most beautiful scenes I've seen in my life. They got so excited that everybody started clapping because of just the pure beauty of this place. And from there, we were met by members of the Queen of Maria. Not the next day, but 2 days later, we were taken to be before her. Now, of course, she wouldn't allow all 55 people or whatever it was to come there. So there was just myself and a woman named Ruth Tive, who is a Maori, a native Maori from New Zealand, who knew her language. And I felt like she was the right person to be there. So the two of us went to meet with the Queen. The Queen was a huge woman with this very big heart. She was just pure love. And she knew exactly why we were there, that we were there to birth this new consciousness onto the earth and to do the ceremony for this. And she was also there with her another woman who was her assistant directly underneath her. And she opened us with open arms and hugs, and we began to talk. And very quickly into all of this, she said to me, "Where do you want to do the ceremony?" Well, I said, without thinking too much, I said, well, I would like to do it in the center of the island. The reason I said that was because I was there in 1985, and I had to do ceremony on that same island in 1985 with the same tribe, and they took me into the center of the island, and that's where we did the ceremony. It's in the Serpent of Light book if you want to read that. And so I said, well, how about the center of the island? And she looked at me and she says, well, I can't do that. And we said, why? And she says, well, I don't have authority. I have authority everywhere, but not in the center of the island. I'm sorry, I can't give you that permission. And the person that was her assistant jumps up, ran over to her and says, no, you don't understand. What's about to take place with this ceremony is one of the most important things on earth ever, and just give him permission and we'll deal with everybody later on this. And she said, no, I don't have that authority and I can't do it. And they started getting into a little bit of aggression, you might say. And she says, you have to. And she says, no, I am not going to break the rules. And she says, you must. And she says, no, I will not. And pretty soon they're screaming at each other. And I mean, really putting out some energy. And, I was actually backing up, moving away. And finally, the Queen broke down crying and says, no, I cannot do this. And that's when Ruth went over to her, put her arms around her, and spoke to her in her own language and tried to calm her down. But it didn't do any good. I mean, she was a queen. She was not going to do what was not right. And she was only going to stay in the truth, and that was the truth, that she didn't have that authority, and she just wasn't going to do it. And so we left there without any permission to do this ceremony. I went back home to my hotel. I'll never forget this. I sat in there going, oh my God, 13,000 years, millions of people, untold amounts of money spent, 83,000 buildings built all over the world, and many lives were lost doing this whole project. And here we come down to the last few minutes, and two women have a fight, and it's not going to happen? I just didn't believe it. But it really did look like that's what was going to happen. It looked like it was just not going to go anywhere from there. So we sat around for a couple days, 3 or 4 days, I don't know how long it was, just waiting for something to happen. And then, out of the middle of nowhere, we get an invitation from the king of the Polynesian people. His name was Papa Mataru. He was very old. Well, he wasn't that old, but he was in his 80s. And he asked us to come and have a conference with him. Well, this was great, because it meant that maybe something would happen where we could continue. Because without permission, we can't do this. We can't just run out into somewhere and do this and run away. This requires the Polynesian people to cooperate with us, to do the ceremony with us. We can't do it, and they can't do it. They need the entire world to be there with them, and that's who we were representing. And so he asked for a meeting, and it was in the afternoon, and I again brought Ruth with me because I knew she could speak the Polynesian language, and she understood their ways and everything else. And so we drove to the address they told us, which was, it was his house. And we went into the backyard, and in the backyard there was Papa Mataru in an old white plastic chair in the sand, and his family standing all around him, his wife, his children, and their children, his grandchildren. They were all sitting around there waiting for us to show up. And they had 2 chairs sitting there for Ruth and I. So we came in, and with great reverence we bowed to them and to give him honor for who he was. And he asked us to sit in the chairs. And so we started to introduce ourselves and everything. And while we were doing that, I noticed that he was squinting like this and trying to see who we were. And I realized that he can't see very well. He also couldn't walk very well because you could see his legs were swollen, and he had a cane beside his chair that he needed to be able to walk with. And so he stopped for a moment, and he said, "Come closer. I have to be able to see you." So I was about 12 feet away from him. And so I moved my chair about half the distance, and I sat down and looked at him. And he still was squinting and squinting. He says, "No, you have to come a lot closer. I can't see you." And so I did. I moved the chair till I was about that far away from his face. And I looked, and he says, "Can you see now?" And he says, "Yes, I can see." And then he goes really quiet, and he says nothing. And so I just sat there waiting for him to make the next move. And he looked at me, and he looked at me, and maybe 2 or 3 minutes went by. And then suddenly looked at me, and maybe 2 or 3 minutes went by. And then suddenly his whole face opened up, and a smile went on his face. And this is a quote. He said, "Oh, I remember you. You're from the stars." And he points to the heavens. He says, "I have been waiting to meet you all my life." He says, "Anything you want, you can have it, whatever it is." And immediately, to not lose the momentum, I said, "Well, we would like to go into the middle of the island to do a world ceremony there." And he says, "Absolutely, you can go into the middle of the island. I'll arrange everything." He says, "I'm an old man, and I can't walk very well, and I can't walk into the middle of the island, and I really want to be in this ceremony. I feel like I need to be there." He says, "Would you do it here?" Well, there's something I didn't say. The night before, I had a dream. And I had a dream that if you can imagine the grid around the Earth, and that it has a toroidal field, like a magnetic field that goes around it, just like it does with the Earth, and it comes around, and it goes in. It comes out of the South Pole, and it goes into the North Pole. And so it comes out of Morea, and it goes into Egypt. And if you think of that, it's like a big tube. It's a vortex, and it's hollow. And I was wanting to be in the center of the island, but what was made clear in this dream, it didn't matter where you were on the island, because the tube that we were needed to be within was bigger than the island. And so we could be anywhere on the island. It didn't really make any difference. And then what happened in the dream right after that, it showed me where the ceremony was going to be. It was a very specific place. We were in a bay where the bay came back around, and you could see the land on the other side. It was a big sandy beach, and there was a river that came, an inland river that came out and emptied into the ocean right there, with this wall that ran along one side, a natural wall, and I could see this. And so the next day, when Ruth and I got together to drive to see Papa Mataru, we were just talking, and I told her about I started to tell her my dream, and I got just partly into the dream, and she goes, I had the same dream. And she finishes the dream. She tells me exactly the same thing, saw the same stuff, and saw the same beach, exactly what it looked like. And I says, wow. I says, this must be, we're supposed to do this. So Papa Mataru says, I can't go to the center of the island. Would you please do it here at my home so I could be there with you? And we were on the beach, but we couldn't see because there were all these trees that blocked the beach. So Ruth and I jumped up, ran through the trees, and we both got out there and we looked around and we go, oh my God, this is it. And there was no doubt to either one of us, this was exactly what we saw in our dream, and we knew we were supposed to do it there. So we went back to Papa and we said, yes, 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 this is where we do it. And he got really happy. He says, oh, I can be there, okay. So our next question was, well, you are the king. When does the ceremony take place? Because we didn't know. And he said, tomorrow morning at sunrise. And so it was sealed. It was ready to take place for the first time. And we left and went back to tell all the other people what had happened during that day. When I got back there, somebody handed me a letter from Australia. I knew the person, but I hadn't talked to them in many years. But for some reason, they knew I was there and sent me this letter. And so I opened the letter up, and it informs me that on the next day, the earth, the sun, and the moon would go into a straight line, and there would be a lunar eclipse, which happened to be on the very day that we were doing this ceremony, and that the shadow of the moon would go directly over the island of Moorea. I go, wow, that's amazing, because we had not planned this, and I didn't even look into the heavens to think about that on those kind of levels. And so now, when I knew that, and we knew the beach and where it was, I was so certain in my heart that we were doing this exactly the way we were supposed to. The next morning at sunrise, all of us pile out of our bus. We squeeze through his backyard and into this beach, and we're all going out into this beach to preparing to do the ceremony. And it was at that moment that I realized I didn't have any idea what I was supposed to do. I didn't know. I was so wrapped up in finding the right place and all these other kinds of things and dealing with the different energies that was there. It never even occurred to me until I'm 5 minutes away from actually doing this. I didn't know what to do. I just dropped down on the sand. I put my head down in the sand so I could be alone, and I asked for inner guidance. And all of my training has been through Native American people and their understandings. And this was different. This was a very interesting ceremony that I had never seen before. But I had to go with what I was being told to do. And so I told everyone to go get something from the water, something from the land, and something from the air. And 3 objects. And so everybody went out. A half an hour later or so, they all came back. And we put these in a sequence of water, earth, air, water, earth, air, all around into my native thing, which was a medicine wheel. It's a circle with a square in the middle for the 4 directions. The ceremony began to unfold in ways, again, that I'd never seen. It was kind of like water or waves coming in, each wave getting stronger and stronger and stronger, and then relaxing. And the energy moved in exactly that kind of way. Papa Mataru was sitting on the edge of the circle in his plastic chair because he couldn't sit down on the ground, and he was watching all of this. And finally, the ceremony came to a close and to an end. And what that signified was that Mother Earth was at that moment giving birth to the consciousness of a new grid. It was crowning. Now, there are some things we have to understand in just a moment here. There's a little bit more to this. But the birthing process was beginning. It was just beginning to take place. After it was over with, Papa Mataru called me over to his chair, and I went over to them, and I asked him, what did he want? And he pulled me really close so that nobody could hear. And he said to me, how did you know to do that ceremony? He says, that ceremony was very precise, And we have been keeping that secret for thousands of years. How did you know that?